Welcome back once again to the Anti-Guru, our fourth part in this amazing little mini-series where we're talking with Helen and Claire. And I think we're really coming now to probably the fun part of this series, because Claire's taken us through the dark times. She's taken us through her amazing uplift. And it's not, Frank, it's not amazing. It's expected. With all of that adversity, a person like Claire would just kick on and get on with it, and that's exactly what she did. But now we're going to talk a little bit with the both of you guys, so welcome once again. No intro again, sorry for those who like the Anti-Guru little intro piece. I'll put it somewhere else, because in reality I want to get on with this. Helen, Claire, welcome once again, part 4 in our little mini series, and how to spot a shark and turn them into shark souffle. Let's call it that. So I'll kick off with this, because I see a lot of this going on. Absence of due diligence is one of the biggest things, I think personally, that is a problem within our world. People taking things at face value, especially when you have a guru who turns around and says, "Why don't you believe me? You know, surely you should believe everything that I say. Sun shines and pours out of my arse as if I was a second solar flare. You know, why do you not believe me?" So I think this due diligence thing, I'll jump in, guys, but I think this due diligence thing is a really, really important part of choosing a business partner.
It is, and that attention to detail, you know, like in Claire's story, there was an inordinate amount of a lack of attention to detail. Things couldn't be backed up, and when detail was asked for, it was never forthcoming. So that's a real alarm bell ringer for me.
And what I would say is, what I've learned from talking to Helen is that most people, when they talk about due diligence, mean on deals. Do the numbers stack up? Has the local market been assessed correctly? But Helen is like, well, what about the person who's delivering this? What about the due diligence on them? Yeah. And that's a whole other level that I don't think people thought was necessary until recently.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It was once described to me that going into business with someone, going into a JV partnership with someone, is effectively marrying them, except marrying them in a different way. Yeah. I wouldn't, marry my wife, very happily married for 3 years now. I wouldn't go into a marriage with her if I wasn't happy. In exactly the same way as you shouldn't go into business with someone unless you know them. They have massive effects on you personally, in terms of time, effort, energy, but more importantly, money. A business I went into a few years ago, I was actually asked by the person I was going into business with, is there anything spotty on your credit history that I need to know about? Because we're going to be tied financially. And by being tied financially means that anything negative on your credit history might pass over to mine. I want to know about it. I was happy to provide that information, happy to provide that I've got a 900 credit rating. That's fine, because that's part of getting to know, being in business with this other person. I've been in business with Keith Oliver, my co-director, who's now our director of planning, ever since 2010. And I got to know him over 2 years working with him at Portsmouth City Council before we decided to jump ship. So in reality, I had enough information about him in order to be able to know that I was going into the business with the right person. We had the same attitude and ethics. But yeah, this due diligence on a person is really quite important.
I call it that holistic due diligence. It's not just about the deal. It's not just making sure the numbers stack up, which, if you're putting your money on the line, it's up to you. I've done some stuff through crowdfunding. I even said about the crowdfunding websites, it's still, they might do DD on deals. Sometimes some don't. It's your money on the line. It's up to you to do your due diligence. And ask around. Ask about people that they've worked with. If Claire had spoken to the architect, she would have known they wouldn't have got paid. I speak to anybody and everybody. You literally can't speak to enough people, because once you keep digging and digging and digging, something will come out. And there's always going to be a clash of personalities. You're always going to find somebody that doesn't like somebody, and somebody's got a bad story. That's life, right? But is there a common theme?
Absolutely. 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 So due diligence on the person as well as the deal, I think fundamentally critical. Due diligence on the deal, let's just deal with that. I know the Plymouth market backwards, sideways, and upside down, and I know how cellular it is, how spotty it is. You cannot take the values for the harbour, Sutton Harbour, and assume you're going to get the same values up in Mutley Plain or over in Devonport. You're just not. That's the nature of the area. And I think that's where I would come up with my second really important shark hunting for beginners sort of ingredient for the souffle, which is, if you're not comfortable investing in that area, then don't allow any amount of pressure be put on you to push you into an area that you're not comfortable being in. Claire knows the London market backwards, and I would have expected her to stay in the London market until she knew Plymouth as well as she knew London. But the guru in this case essentially showed her a deal and pitched it in a certain way that said, well, this is effectively a London-esque deal. We can make it work. He put it in your language. And when you're putting deals in that way, or when you're presenting deals in that way, you're presenting a very unreal reality. So I think my second sort of thought on this, and it will be very much over to you guys after this, because these are my two real takeaways. Don't allow yourself to be uprooted and forced into an area that you do not know or understand. What do you guys think?
I have an even broader principle than that, to be honest. It's one of my principles of investing in general, not just property: earn your right to risk. If you don't know what you're doing, if you don't understand whatever it is, property, the area, crypto, I see all the time, there's so many of those scams around at the moment. Whatever it is, if it's a specific niche in a specific equity sector, do you understand that? Do you understand the fundamentals? Do you understand the volatility? Understand, do I know the square footage of, the price to build in Portsmouth? No, I don't. But I'd bloody go and well and find out before I did. And it's a very it's a broad principle I commonly apply. Do your best and have a deep dive into learning about something before you go into it, or dip your toe in. Don't go in with your life savings. There it is on the line with something you've got no clue about. Stick pocket money in it. Stick pocket money and learn.
I do agree, but then I would just say with Foliot House, where I put my house on the line for a large commercial conversion in a town far removed from my own. I spent, because there was a restrictive covenant on that deal that took us a year to crack. And during that time, I spoke to agents like you would not believe. And I went down there and I really felt like I did get to know that area. So before we signed and actually completed on that property, I had spoken, I grilled every agent, just tell me, made them talk to me at length. Until I really felt confident that we were going to make a product that was going to fly in that area. And there's always a sense, whatever you do, if it's not been done before and there's no direct comps, you're sort of thinking, bloody hell, I hope my feelings are right, because there's not always direct evidence. But I got Dan and Joe and they knew the area. I felt as confident as we could be on it, and it has been justified. But I think probably what you've said is correct, and stick to a patch you do know.
Yeah, or more importantly, learn the patch you're moving into. Yeah. When we decided to invest in Plymouth, we learned everything that there was to learn about that area of Plymouth.
Yeah.
So we're doing our Raglan Gatehouse developments in Devonport. We learned everything that we needed to know about Devonport, what the market was like, market volatility, what was going on with employment in the Devonport area, even down to what ships from the Royal Navy were going to be allocated to Devonport Dock, right? That level, so that we knew that our plan B was secured, which is we hold, we refinance, we retain, and we rent. And we rent them to naval workers, because the naval workers live 500 yards away from where this is being built. Yeah, that was the important thing as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
Helen, shark hunting, far away. I've given my two, so you far away with some.
Oh, there's so many things to watch out for. I would give a quick plug for a book that both Claire and I have learned an awful lot from, and it really helps you understand how these people operate and certain of the characteristics, like the charisma, like the pity story. It's a book, and I've forgotten the author, but it's called The Sociopath Next Door. And I know that sounds very dramatic, but honestly, sociopaths, 1 in 19 people is a sociopath. It's 4% of the population.
And you would not particularly, it's not like they've got a sign on their head. You can't tell.
Not all planners are sociopaths. We're all mental, and we're all fine. We have no emotional
spectrum to a degree, I suppose. Yeah. But
I think that number is a lot higher in property. I think it just attracts kind of narcissists and sociopaths, where that person's driving behavior is themselves and their own concern. And the specific thing about sociopaths is that they don't have a conscience. So they can sleep at night knowing that they've lost your money. It's not like any of us here where, we'd be beside ourselves. We wouldn't do that to somebody. It just doesn't bother them, which is a leap for us to even think about. So highly recommend. I listened to it on Audible, and it was a really good listen. We did a red flag video, or we talk about red flags. It's actually on our Property Sisters UK, our YouTube site as well. So it's probably worth going over those quite quickly. Certainly, we've covered a number of them, and you'll see them, when you look back and see the other episodes that we've done here through Claire's story. And pressure is one of them. If there's a time pressure, a run to the back of the room and sign today. If there's an emotional pressure, really need to get this done. And if there's manipulation going on through use of your emotions, and scarcity falls into that as well. It's a very manipulative tool.
It does.
That is certainly one to look out for.
And certainly pressure selling is contrary to the Consumer Acts. So we know that for a fact, that form of activity, that run to the room, that the time limited, all of that very American style of selling is actually contrary to our Consumer Act. So shouldn't be practiced in the UK.
Yeah, for good reason, exactly.
Yeah, but that pressure is something that is practiced.
Yeah. Oh, very
and
much
it's
so.
sad that it is, but
it's done in a subtle way, so you don't even really notice that it's happening, but you feel it, you sense it. And I think there's so many people in property who are good people and just don't realize the tactics that are being used on them. And that's why we're talking about this. What other ones are there, Helen?
I mean, partly this falls into that as well, but language, the language that people are using. If they're over promising, it's guaranteed, it's easy, it's a no-brainer. Listen to the those words again, very emotive language that's used to manipulate. I went on an NLP course specifically to learn those techniques as a defensive mechanism. Like, I don't want to be, or I want to understand when and if I'm being manipulated, because in property you will be. So get on the front foot and know when be aware of when it's happening.
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of funny that one property guru in particular. In fact, there are two property gurus that are ex-magicians and essentially NLP master practitioners. They know exactly how to do it, but it is highly used. It's almost like the gearing up thing that happens at the start of any property course. Raise your hand if you want to raise more money. Are you interested in property? Do you want to work passively? Do you want a passive income? All of that. And that brings me onto one I want to throw in here, which is the promise of passive, the promise of do nothing wealth. Now, I've done previous videos on this. As people will know who watch the channel, I've done a video on property development is not passive. It's a career. It's a job, right? You can't trade a job for nothing. You are trading a job for a job. It's just your gainful employment is different. It goes from doing accountancy or town planning or whatever you do to being a property developer, and that becomes your job. And job doesn't mean just over broke. A lot of the gurus use that as, oh, job means just over broke. I watched a guru on YouTube. It's always fun watching the gurus on YouTube because you get to see everything that they do. And if like I'm sure like Helen has, if you ever want to, get all the tips on how to spot a guru, then just watch Guru's pitch video on YouTube. It's hilarious. But they always say, oh, job means I was in a job, I was just over broke. JOB, just over broke. It's not that. Job's a life support, right? You need one in order to maintain your state of living. That is why so many people in the country at the moment are panicking their nuts off, because they are, if you're in the retail sector in particular, you are facing the possibility that your company might go bankrupt at a drop of a hat. The people working for EasyJet, it was reported on the BBC of all things. And when things get reported on the BBC, you know they're bad. But EasyJet was reported as saying, we're only one bad winter away from going bust. And they're heading for a bad winter. Yeah. Where can you go that you can't 14-day quarantine anywhere in the world right now? There's not many places that are on that list anymore. So, people in those sectors are panicking their nuts off. They need their life support mechanism. So why encourage someone to leave their life support mechanism and go and do something else? I don't understand that. But there is also no such thing, in my view, as passive in the property development sector. There's no, and Claire's found this out. I think you've gained the masters on it, haven't you, Claire? In terms of, there's no such thing as passive. Being sold passive is being sold a lie. It's being sold a fallacy, because you're always engaged. You always have to be there. If you're not managing it, then who else will? And I think that's the important lesson, the important shark hunting tip there. So if you're being sold passive, you're being sold a unicorn, and unicorns don't exist.
Exactly. And, even I bought into that in kind of a certain degree. Maybe I'm just not the type that can be passive, but I thought, look, I've got this money I got from my previous career, like, what can I do? Always had an interest in property. I know I'll go in, I'll invest it, I'll hand it over, that I'll get a great return on it, either a kind of monthly return, or we'll make loads in this development, and I don't have to do much. Well, that's just A, super stupid and super risky. Go ahead and do that, but it goes back to the first point about due diligence. Due diligence is your responsibility if you are handing your money over. And to do the level of due diligence that you really need to on the person, on the deal, and on the platform, if it's crowdfunding, that ain't passive. And it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be able to do that in a day.
I would add that somebody's response when you attempt to do that due diligence, and you touched on this earlier, John, when you happily share your credit score. But if people are cagey about sharing things or question your right to see certain things, I mean, it's almost like you just need to walk away at that point. And I know Helen's got a developer that she invests with, and it's this idea of just being incredibly transparent. Everything you said was uploaded to Dropbox day one, before you even asked.
Yeah,
it's there.
Exactly. Transparency, is absolutely key. We had a Dropbox. There's my info, there's my credit details, there's all my stuff in there, copies of passports. I am who I say I am. Same for him, a statement of assets and liabilities. Great.
But I think anybody who is suggesting that you just take their word for it, that's probably the biggest red flag of them all.
That it is the warning sign beyond warning signs, isn't it? And it comes back to Helen's original statement. How have they earned their right to risk? How have they got there? How have they won their ability to stay on that stage? Or be put on that pedestal? Go on.
I know what I was going to say. So my guru mentor had a backstory about what he'd done, the empire he'd built overseas, but nobody thinks to go and check. And actually, not so long ago, somebody did think to go and check, and they looked on the French version of Companies House and discovered that he's an undischarged bankrupt there. So he's being pursued by creditors overseas as well. Now he's got a story about that he, you know, he says, oh, but you don't know the true details, you know, you're just jumping to conclusions. But, you know, actually it doesn't take a lot of digging to find, and none of us did it. None of us thought to do it. We just bought his story.
And interestingly now, with international banks, so with banking being a wholly international practice now, it becomes incredibly easy now, unless you go with a UK only based bank, for the international bank to go and dig. And they do a credit referencing check in every jurisdiction, in some cases, especially if they know it's an international investor. So our investor at Raglan is an international investor. He lives in the Far East. He's English, but he lives in the Far East. That's where he chooses to live. And they did a history check on him in his jurisdiction. So they knew who he was, and they did a check on him in his jurisdiction to find out who it was. That is part of good due diligence now done by a banking sector. Probably wasn't done until 2 or 3 years ago, more widely, because of international money laundering laws, etc., etc. So, yes, absolutely.
And you realise that because of that increased transparency in our world, you know, social media is evil in many ways, but on that level, it means that you can find out. You just Google somebody's name, you'd find out about my guy pretty damn quick. But so really, none of us have got an excuse. And yet there are still people who will just be listening to his talk and buying it again. I know it's going to happen. And I tell you what, what we've discovered is they're either women who are generally a bit more trusting and soft and, you know, accommodating. And they are men who are not alpha males. You know, they are probably a bit more sensitive, a bit more vulnerable in some ways. They pick their victims very carefully. It's prey.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
But the one thing we can do to protect ourselves is use that internet in the way that it can serve us. It's truly transparent if you just spend a bit of time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they know exactly what they're doing. And on the Google point, the top tip is don't just Google it and look at the first page. Keep going and get to page 3 at least, because that's where the juicy information starts to come out.
And there are so many Facebook forums and groups where, you know, you kind of moot a couple of things and people will very generously give you feedback, even if they want to do it as a sort of private conversation. Yeah. So there are so many ways to avoid it if you have any suspicions, or even if you don't, even if you think somebody's as clean as anything, you should still do it. That would be my approach now. I've learnt my lesson.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point to end. So I want to just thank you really, Helen and Claire, for joining us for this mini-series. I've found it incredibly enlightening. I'm sure anyone watching will do also. Like, comment, subscribe if they want to get in touch with you. So if anyone's got an investment they'd like to swing past you, Claire, because obviously you've learned all these important lessons now, and that is information that should be shared, not held. So how do they get in touch with you guys?
Probably, I don't know, Instagram is our platform of choice. Claire L. Norwood on Instagram, LinkedIn, Claire Norwood. Yeah, I'm pretty contactable.
Wonderful. Yeah. And Helen?
I've recently launched a website, so helenchorley.com. Insta, I'm Helen Chorley Investor, LinkedIn, Helen Chorley. And also, as I said, that red flags video that we did, that's on we're both co-founders of Property Sisters UK. So there's a lot of information on our YouTube channel there as well, and
it's not about selling, it's just about information sharing.
Not selling anything, it's just
so I'll pop a link to that YouTube channel in the description below.
That would be great.
So absolutely go and like, comment, subscribe to the good stuff that Helen and Claire are doing. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me on the Anti-Guru. Catch us on the next one. Pleasure. Like, comment, subscribe, of course, guys, and comment, please. Want to hear what's going on with you. we'll see you on the next one.